So we're talking about AI this week.
To make a good model, you need to understand your data, you need to understand how to clean it so you're not being biased, and it has to be fair and balanced.
Now AI is to a point where it's actually useful in everyday life.
I'm telling you, you just got to go to Las Vegas and steal a quantum computer from IBM.
But you can see that real people aren't going to be needed anymore.
All this has to be supervised right now. We're not at a point where the AI can run itself.
What else do you need for this equation to make pretty much humans obsolete?
This was like the worry when, like with the whole robot uprising and taking all our jobs. The specific jobs humans are doing today might change, but I don't think that like humans get removed from the equation.
Why do I need these people other than just to turn on the lights?
I see the path you're talking about. I just think humans are too like at our like core philosophical nature, we're too much of survivors. Like we would never let it get there.
We don't trust. Humans don't trust well.
You're giving humans too much credit, man. We know these humans. Hey everybody, welcome to Missing Links with John, Brock, and myself, Stephen King, where we discuss what's missing in Web3 architecture. For feedback, please go to missinglinks.fm, send us an email, give us some feedback on what we discuss and what you'd like us to cover next week. All right, let's get into it. All right, guys, I'm not going to welcome you to the podcast today because Brock doesn't want me to do it. So
there we go.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, welcome, everybody, to Missing Links with Brachiosaurus, John, and myself, Steven. How you guys doing? Can I say that at least? Can I ask how you guys are doing?
No, we should have it pre-recorded every time.
Why don't we'll use AI for this part?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, cool. So we're talking about AI this week and blockchain. It's definitely AI has crossed the chasm in my book. I've been using a number of tools like Jasper and a few others, but not necessarily for crypto, but for other parts of my life. And actually, I was showing it to my dad today, who's in his 70s, and he's like, he just couldn't believe it. I mean, his jaw was like down to the ground. I was like, it was writing stuff about him and his history and some of the developments he's done. And he just like thought he was this rock star and it was cool. But anyway, so John, what I was saying before we started to hit recording is Brock and I are building a product. It's an indexing product around data. And I've been playing around with OpenAI's a couple of their frameworks. And I asked them how this could be beneficial to us, something beyond trading. And, Brock, you were telling me that what we're doing is a bit deterministic, but beyond that, we might be able to play around with some things.
Yeah. So like for Index & Co., the way we've been thinking about the product is we're just indexing data. And so we're configuring ways for people to access that data. So the data isn't changing in that basic concept. That's where like the determinism comes in. But with AI, kind of the point is to build up some sort of function or model so that you can ask it to predict a future value. So where we were kind of landing with like product-wise is you could hypothetically, in a serious oversimplification, stick on a machine learning transformation at the end of the indexing process.
And so, John, as we were wrapping up last week's podcast, you were kind of going down the path of, look, this stuff is computationally heavy. You have to basically feed it and train it. It's not like the framework itself for things like OpenAI already have done that. Now, apps like Jarvis have, they fed it, like they say 10% of the internet before 2019. So it seems application specific, but they give you sort of almost like blockchain gives you a basic foundation to build on. That's sort of what OpenAI is doing, right?
Right.
Well, and like with certain about the indexing and AI specifically, the like biggest hurdle with AI and machine learning models is just getting clean data. So hypothetically, if you're going through the process of indexing data, removing out duplicates, parsing it down to exactly what you want, you're doing that cleansing up front already.
Right. And I think I mentioned it last week, but like 80 to 90% of the job of building a model is just getting good data and cleaning it.
Well, why can't we use AI for that part or machine learning? Teach the machines to clean the data because you have to
because you're biased. You're still biased when you build a machine. Whenever you build something, your biases are built into that machine. A good example of this would be in 2013 and 2014, when Pokemon Go was a big thing. You would see that there wasn't that many good rare Pokemon in black neighborhoods. That's because how the data was cleaned was by people who lived in predominantly wealthy neighborhoods and used data that was more rich and collected from proper neighborhoods that were not, crime ridden in essence. So when you put that through a model, naturally the model is going to say, okay, it's in our best interest to make Pokemon here. Same thing with crime algorithms. In 2014, the state of Michigan imposed a black box model of. For those who don't know, a black box versus a white box model is a black box model algorithm is where you don't actually know how it works under the hood. You can't
Audit.
audit it as well as words. Brock, I have a hard time with words, but yeah, you can't audit it as well as understand what's going on under the hood. Whereas a white box model, you can actually see is more open source esque. So what happened is the state of Michigan used this model to determine if someone would reoffend, pretty much determining if you should be on probation or not. So what they would do is they would enter in your race, your exposed crimes, as well as your past history, and determine what's the percentage likelihood of you reoffending, and use that to determine bail and jail time. But when they realized that the model itself was skewed towards people who were people of color, obviously it would have a heavy and very negative uh, computational bias towards people in that data set because that was the only people in the data set. Back to Brock's point, most of the time, to make a good model, you need to understand your data, you need to understand how to clean it so you're not being biased, and it has to be fair and balanced. That is the biggest thing here.
Yeah, but don't you think we're going to get to a point where machines will do that part for us? I mean, they're not biased, so we could teach them.
Machines are biased. They're made by humans. It doesn't matter. Machines are biased. No matter how hard, they are biased.
The counter to this is I was just listening to a podcast with, I think his name was Andre Karpathy, is like the head of AI at Tesla for years. They're doing roughly this concept where it's they started super supervised, saying that we want to build an ML model to predict X. And as they keep layering up, they now have models building more models. And so now they can say, we want this goal, figure out what you need to predict, and that
Right.
they can train ML models based on past data.
Yeah. Okay. I guess that makes sense. So, look, I feel like this technology has been slowly progressing, but it only released really out to the public. I feel like this is crypto in 2016. There's only a small enclave of a community that really knows about it outside the development community that are really have been focused on this stuff. It's sort of like VR, right? You keep hearing about VR, but it's like, who cares? Because it's the same thing over and over. There's not these big breakthroughs, but now AI is to a point where it's actually useful in everyday life. So, okay. So how does this work into blockchain? I've seen use cases around healthcare and marketing and other things like that. But what have you guys seen?
Brock, you want to go first? I have a couple examples.
The ones I have seen are generally around verification. So Chainlink hired somebody from Google that was working on AI to do verification, presumably. And then I haven't seen a product that's doing this, but I have to assume that there are traders out there running ML models against all this public trading data.
Was it CertiK? Is that the company?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, in a non-financial sense, there are companies there. Back in 2018, before we were all together at Imbrex, I did some work with IBM, and I was in New York. And a bit of work that was done around ML was on private blockchains, but primarily in supply chain and shipping. So
Mhm.
Merck's, was it Merck's or
Yeah,
what's
or
the shipping company?
Maersk,
Is it Merck's?
M
Yeah,
A M A E R S
Maersk.
K or something. Yeah,
Yeah, everyone says it different, but yeah.
yeah.
So they started translating their manifestos from 2019 to now onto a private blockchain to where they can use ML to determine either fraud or discrepancies. But let's say you are picking up bananas, for example, and this is a very extreme example. You're picking up bananas at your local store, and there happens to be a funnel web spider in there. Very lethal, but they can end up on produce somehow. They can track that bushel of bananas back to the shipping container, to the ship, the supplier, all the way back to the farm, and verify that anything else that came off that, you know, ship that was either had spiders or was contaminated or poisonous can be taken off the shelf in a verifiable way using these models.
But that doesn't necessarily require.
What was that?
Yeah, I was gonna say that doesn't really require ML though, right? That's just like that's what blockchain does. Is it's that immutable
Well, it's
ledger.
it's the blockchain, but also as they start changing the model, saying, "Hey, we've had these events happen." So think of it almost like your credit card when you have like a cluster model where it says, "Hey, I see Brock's in New York, then he's in Chicago, then he's there." It could determine and kind of predict fraud. The same thing can be done with the supply chain. After X amount of events where you say, hey, something bad happened on this chain, it will say, hey, there's a likelihood that something's bad. We should flag it for inspection at the port. You see what I mean?
Mm.
So it's a
Yep, yep, yep.
yeah. So blockchain and ML is more along the lines of it's twofold in the interaction. It's interaction by the user to the chain as well as the user to the model. So you need to tell the model, hey, this was good, this is bad, and then the model uses the chain to actually pull and verify data and then give you what it thinks is the next prediction, at least in supply chain.
Are companies like OpenAI, are they sort of like creating the Ethereum for artificial intelligence? In other words, like I can play around in their sandbox on their website, right?
Right.
And I'm using their backend tech. But let's say you guys are actual developers, and so would you go and would you like you if we were going to create like a real estate specific blockchain, we would go and we would either clone the Ethereum or Polkadot or one of the other chains. Is OpenAI and that type of software the same idea?
It's more like libraries
Yeah.
or sets of pre-trained models. So like TensorFlow is a really popular library that I believe is put out by Doodle or at least sponsored by Doodle.
Yeah.
And so it's the neural net concepts, machine learning concepts, and you can run any data you want through it on your own machines.
Huh. Okay. And so like back to your biases, yeah, like I wonder like if I have Google, nothing against Google, I love Google, but they have biases, right? So they built that into
Right.
TensorFlow.
So OpenAI, TensorFlow, you could think of it as like two different offerings that they come with. One being just the SDK or developer tooling to build your own model off your own data. The other is to use an existing model to potentially build another model or just like make predictions based on inputs. So like when you were doing like the headline, what is the word I'm looking for? Like sentiment analysis, whether it's like positive, negative, or neutral, that's coming off of a pre-trained model. Those pre-trained models could theoretically have biases, but if you're just using their tooling to build your own model, any biases are going to come from your own data.
Okay. Okay, because it's like if you're going to use something like Ethereum, you wouldn't go and create the bytecode yourself because why would you do that? You could just use the actual code that they provide. Same thing with AI. You wouldn't go create it. You wouldn't build it from the ground up because that's really hard.
Exactly. So one case that I've seen, and this actually was part of one of my master thesis projects, was something I developed called Vera News. And I think I've talked to you guys about this, but pretty much it was a group of smart contracts for Ethereum. And this was back in 2017 when Solidity was still trying to figure shit out. And I used smart contracts with incentivized tokens and an AI model to curate news. Now, there's companies out there that are doing this now after the 2016 election and 2020 election, but the idea was that you bet on the validity of a news story, and based on how valid that story is, the metadata is then fed into a model, and it helps determine if it's fake or not. And then people who did not do their research and promoted fake information actually lost money, and those who actually promoted proper information that was verified got a payout. So the combination of that with its metadata and a kind of decision tree AI model created this kind of ecosystem of news curation. I naturally dropped it because it was just too hard to kind of maintain. But there are companies called, I think it's called Blackbird AI. It's based out of San Fran that do that now at scale.
Yeah. So beyond trading, though, I guess there has to be more applications built on chain, because right now there's a lot of interest around NFTs again. I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but it won't go away.
Yep.
And I saw that you posted that NFT vending machine. Ha ha ha.
Yep.
It's pretty crazy. But I was going to talk about something, but I forget what I was going to say. So go ahead, guys. I'm like having a.
Besides the example I did with Veranews and discussing metadata from contracts and how that can be used to determine information, there is a company called GameFi and Adobe, which they are in New York and DC respectively, which deal with real estate and healthcare. So actually, they use the blockchain and AI models to determine fraud for insurance claims, as well as real estate. What's called? So, Stephen, this is up your alley. What's it called? Risk assessment. So, pretty much determining the risks of certain units in a building or in a certain area based on a collection of verified data off the chain, private chain.
Yeah.
So those are a few applications between medical, financial, commercial, and consumer, if you want to call it. But I haven't seen anything outside of that right now.
There was one other one that came to mind, and I can't remember who's doing it, but bytecode on chain. It's like contracts get uploaded, and if you don't verify your contract with like an ether scan, nobody knows your ABI or your application binary interface. And so there's a couple teams using AI to algorithmically decode the bytecode from the chain to like figure out what the contract is. So like kind of like reverse engineering that.
That's a good idea.
Doesn't Etherscan already do that though? You can see the raw contract theoretically.
They will show you the opcodes and they like try to decode it, but as far as I know, they're not using like AI. It's just kind of some sort of like deterministic functional programming.
I see.
Yeah.
So if I deploy a simple getter setter contract, you would only see the ABI or the interface methods, but to see like the actual
code and
code execution, like to see the actual code commands per line, you can't do that right now in Etherscan.
Not reliably. Like it's
okay.
At best, you get opcodes, and it's not super usable unless you really know what you're doing.
No.
So it sounds like the real use case is until blockchain really needs to scale. We need to get more data on chain. Right now, anything that comes about is going to be mostly around trading. But long term, it sounds like if you combine these two technologies, blockchain and artificial intelligence, it's going to take unpredictability out of the world, right? I mean, how can it not? I mean, if you have everything that you could possibly imagine on a blockchain, all of that data that's in computer form. And then you have these really advanced ML algorithms. Well, people are pretty predictable when they're in very large groups. So you can imagine a world where it's like, where does there can't be markets, right? I mean, and then what do you guys envision just in terms of somebody's got to be managing these layers? And I imagine there's going to be so many layers of abstraction. There's going to be very few that know how the whole system actually works together. Have you guys ever thought about that?
Yes and no. Like the more abstraction you add, the more clarity you lose in the data, and I think
Yeah.
that is somewhat of a concern because then the model becomes, I don't want to say biased, becomes fuzzy, if that makes sense. It becomes inaccurate because you start abstracting at so many layers, you have to make
Less clean.
generalizations.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't
Exactly.
think a machine's going to clean that up if we tell it to?
Yeah, but
We're
you're
not
telling
there
it how
yet.
to clean it. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
not there that in computing. You're telling it how to clean. You have a bias. Even if you abstract that, it's still
I'm not.
it's fuzzy
I'm
at the
not talking
top.
about today. I'm talking about. Look, this stuff is exponential, right? It goes pretty quick. I'm not saying even in our lifetime, but within the next 100 years, these machines should be able to work on such a level of processing that they're able to grab all that data and store it and clean it and do all that jazz, right?
Yeah, I imagine like in the next decades when like AGI V2 or V3 is out, absolutely. Like
Yeah.
that's when you end up with Skynet and they can just do whatever they want. Yeah.
Yeah. So once we kind of solve the issue, I think we're at a plateau. I think the biggest issue we have with this problem is not software, it's hardware. I think we've gotten to the point where we've plateaued with hardware a little bit. So once we can kind of solve some of the hardware constraints where it doesn't matter how much computing power you need to solve a certain problem, it will just be solved. I think that's when we'll start to see breakthroughs.
But like to
Because
Steven's point though,
software.
we still don't have the software capabilities to do true unsupervised generalized training. It's like the
I
reason
think
there's
that comes from
biases
a
is because we have to
hardware.
like look at it.
Well, right, but I think that comes down to hardware. We don't actually, everything at the end of the day runs on hardware, and hardware is the underlying thing that runs the world. So if we fix the hardware problem, I think we can fix all the other problems. That's just my
Says a
opinion.
hardware guy. He's not being
Uh-huh.
subjective at all.
Uh-huh.
No
Who,
shame.
who's sponsoring you tonight, John?
Not
Not in the video, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
We'll say
AMD.
Nikon is sponsoring me
There you
today.
go.
Yeah.
You know,
No, but truly, genuinely, quickly, Stephen, generally, I do believe that a lot of the issues we have is that we've been following the premise of computing that was defined back in the 80s and 90s, even the 70s with like NASA and trying to get stuff on the moon, just following the idea of ones and zeros on computers. Once we've kind of gone out there, you can have ones and twos, you can have quantum computing, you can have multiple combinations of stuff. Then you can build models and theories around, well, maybe we don't need to, you can build better computing methodology around unsupervised learning where you could say, hey, you have more possible options to actually explore something. Whereas it's very Boolean right now. It's this or that, you know? And I think
So you're saying a massive, not just like performance in hardware, but an entirely new hardware class like quantum computing to unlock new
right,
algorithms, which lead to new software, which leads to new ML.
right,
Yeah.
right. That leads to the actual unsupervised training because it will unlock not just a two-dimensional kind of decision class and how you
Right.
run an algorithm, but 4 to 16 time dimensional class of determining options, which breaks out of everything.
That's fair. That's fair.
I'm telling
Although
you, you just got to go to Las Vegas and steal a quantum computer from IBM.
so all right, so it'll be interesting to see where this goes, but like, so this is crazy because I think back to like early in crypto, and you see Bitcoin come out, and you see all the volatility and you're like, this is crazy. This is like, you never see a new currency, rarely. And people start talking about tulips and you're like, look, even if you lived back in that day and there were tulips, if you got in and got out, you did pretty well. So that's like a once in a generation thing. So then AI, it's talked about, it's interesting, but what do we really do with it? Boom, they opened GPT-3 out to the public. And I don't know how many people are playing around with this stuff, but it's like, holy mackerel. Not only did we get crypto, but now we're getting AI. And like, we live in like the most rare time. I mean, the ability to arbitrage with these two technologies is like, it blows me away. I've been doing stuff with these tools that are like, it just reminds me of like the early days of crypto. So do you guys see that it's just natural that this stuff's going to work itself into blockchain, and it's just going to be obviously different applications? It's just going to basically enhance applications that are already focused around data in some way.
I agree, and I don't even think it has to just be data, because data, as far as like AI is concerned, is anything that's digital. So it could be images, video, content. Yeah, like you could start seeing AI avatars on Zoom calls instead of real people.
But you can see that real people aren't going to be needed anymore. You're already seeing it with stock photos. There's a company, I don't know if it was
But no,
Adobe or whatever.
your original point though, like all this has to be supervised right now. We're not at a point where the AI can run itself. Like
No,
somebody has to like.
But you're starting to see what it potentially could look like by this I forget, it was Pexels or one of them. Basically, it's years and years and years of people uploading and selling their photos on this website. We get to an inflection point where they say, hey, we're not going to pay you for any of those photos, but what we will pay you going forward, even though they don't need to use any of the photos going forward, because they have already collected enough data to make the tool that they need to auto generate images, right? So people are no longer needed for that. So that's just like a very, very, very early stage or step in this sort of.
But that was a supervised model. That was never unsupervised. It just, they had enough data to run the model at the end of the day.
I guess my point is that, yeah, you can see with these two technologies what is the need at some point, but that's where we're going. What is the point of having people other than being able to somehow understand this thing? At some point, people aren't going to be able to understand it. But I'm not even talking about that. I mean, these two technologies, I don't think you need, other than your hardware, John. What else do you need for this equation to make pretty much humans obsolete? I think in the next year we're going to see a lot of jobs drop off just from GPT-3.
But see,
Right.
this was like the worry when, like, with the whole robot uprising and taking all our jobs. And I think this goes.
Yeah, but those robots suck. I mean, they
Right,
weren't like
because
this.
the models suck, because
But
you
that's
still need humans
But what I'm saying is these models don't suck. You guys, if you're Brock, I know you're playing around with this. John, I imagine that you have. This is like crazy groundbreaking stuff.
but what I'm getting,
I mean,
what I'm getting at is like the AI has to be programmed. So like the specific jobs humans are doing today might change, but I don't think that like humans get removed from the equation. They're just doing something different.
yeah, but I'm writing Python using GPT-3. And I don't, most code I've ever written is like,
It's it's like putting on a exoskeleton to go do construction work.
Right. It complements the job.
Right.
It's, as of now, all it can do is complement the job, because it has to still be supervised by humans.
Right.
So to have it unsupervised, we need the increase in hardware and technical understanding of it, and then the trade-off and trust of it before that kind of Brock's analogy, exoskeleton is not an exoskeleton. It's fully autonomous.
yeah, I mean, I know you guys have to defend your side, but I'm gonna send Brock some Python, and I'm going
Send
to
in the
send
group chat.
John.
Yeah.
I'm gonna send you some C# and or C that is advanced beyond you've ever seen. You guys are gonna be like, holy mackerel, Steven, what is this?
I did
No.
C code for 2.5 years for the Department of Defense and Energy. I've seen all the C I need in my life.
You don't like C, John?
I
mean,
love
you're
C.
really
I'd love to
I was going
see.
to say, you're walking the woke boundary tonight between all that segregation stuff in the beginning and now some of the seat talk. I mean, you're going to have the one troll that we have on you, like tarred and
Bring it.
feathered, man.
Bring
Did,
it.
did
Bring it.
did you pay your taxes while you worked for the DoD though? That's the
Oh,
real
I
question.
did.
Yeah.
I had to take security training from an acronym, 3-letter acronym agency. So
I can't imagine what you had to go through to get that job.
yeah,
Um,
we could discuss that offline.
yeah. And look, it's a bit unfair because you guys know this stuff down to its very core, and I'm much more peripheral. If that,
But that's a
I can't say
good
words either.
combination though, because at the end of the day, it's not me and Brock who will determine its adoption. It's you, because you're the public. We work on stuff like this. You are the public facing entity. You're the one who determines how it gets implemented and pretty much built into society at the end of the day. You're the one who makes the decision on the laws, voting, and all that if it gets there.
Well, I don't make any decisions,
I
so
was
I
going to
can tell
say,
you that right
even in
now.
your case, Stephen, though, you phrased it as you are writing code with AI. Like you're the one choosing to write this code.
Right, but I can see just from going from 0 to 1 million with my experience with this technology, it was like it reminds me of the early days of crypto. There's people talking about tulips and this will never become money, but it was clear as day. Hey, this is going to become money. This is a much more efficient way to move value in this virtual world we're in, and so I see the same thing with AI. Look, it makes sense that we have to write it, we have to manage it. Of course, it's still very early, but I can see the path to where humans are very, very quickly. I understand that we need the processing, but also I have been following what's going on with quantum computing, and it's funny because that doesn't get talked about a lot. But I haven't seen or played with the technology like I have in this realm. But it sounds like it's making some serious strides, especially in the last like year and a half. So I can see a path where developers are no longer, the machines are literally, they're writing the code. Now, maybe they need input from humans as a security barrier or something like that. But I would imagine that at some point they'll get beyond that too.
Like at a minimum, they have to be directed.
They don't have to be directed. At some point though,
Yeah, they have to. You have to tell them at least, hey, figure out how to put this card together, do this puzzle, and then they'll slowly
Go
do it.
solve cancer. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
right. But I'm saying once they solve all of that, right, and they start to understand, okay, I'm getting all these inputs from humans, and now I've developed to a part where it's like, why do I need these people other than just to turn on the lights? Well, okay, so and they've got every piece of it. I can see. Look, all that sci-fi talk that you kind of hear about, it's like it goes over your head because you're just like, look, I don't see that. I don't see the path to that right now. I now see a path to that, and I don't know how you guys don't see that. I'm not saying tomorrow. I'm not saying next week. I'm saying in like within the next 100 years. There's not a doubt in my mind, unless something catastrophic happens.
I see the path you're talking about. I just think humans are too, like at our like core philosophical nature, we're too much of survivors. Like we would never let it get there.
We don't trust. Humans don't trust well.
You're giving humans too much credit, man.
I
we know these humans.
I don't know. I think there is a point where, and I think this everything with Tesla outside of Elon Musk being a nutbag, everything with the autopilot is more of a social human experiment outside of anything else, in my opinion. Because
How dare you, John? How dare you talk about Elon Musk like that? You're very controversial in this episode.
I don't he's an interesting guy, but I don't know. He's on my bad side. But how I put it is that, and this is something I've discussed with Rachel, and I've told Brock about this multiple times. Like every car that's being built by Tesla has autopilot in all the hardware built. Think about the amount of waste there that people are going to have all that hardware pre-built without actually using it. So it becomes more of a human question of, do you trust machines? And it goes back to this whole, God, I forgot the name of the paper, but it goes back to the 90s where it talks about the ghost of the machine, which is the idea that machines after a certain period of time will realize that humans are just screwing up and we should just take over. So that kind of, I see it as more of a social experiment where I see everyone trying, the beta of all the new Tesla software for the cars, this and that. Are you really trying? The question becomes: are you trusting the company or are you trusting the hardware? Do you trust that they have your best interests? Because at the end of the day,
No. Of course not.
exactly. So why trust it? So then it becomes like, if
well, I don't trust it.
So it goes back to Brock's point. Like, if we're going down this route where the default is we don't trust it, how are we going to get to that point where we're allowing it to do everything for us?
Because people move in herds, in large groups. You saw that with COVID.
Yeah, that's why I said it's a social experiment, because if there's not mass adoption of just having a car drive you, and like, how are we going to get from there to them, like, running the government or something like that in the future?
Because if you've just, like, in the last 10 years, just Trump becoming president, you see things, people keep their mouths shut that actually liked Trump. And I don't want to get political because or like don't wear a mask or you name it. People don't talk. You see it show up in voting and stuff like that, because people don't want to be ostracized. We're social animals, right? So,
right.
But I can see how incrementally, but within a short amount of time relative to how all of this stuff is being outlaid, I can see that happening quickly, and people kind of just going with it because it's easier. It's easier to move with the herd. It's easier to make money that way. It's easier to feed my family that way. Hey, I just want to kind of wake up, do my thing. I can see it. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Actually, I am saying it's going to happen. John, I'll bet you the Jeep that this will happen.
The Jeep that I rewired at your place.
So it's 70. I want us to get on a call or go grab coffee, and I want us to look at where AI is, and if people are involved in terms of programming it.
That's fair. First of all, if I'm getting the Jeep, just off the bat, since I'm getting the Jeep, will it survive the next 45 years?
Yes, and it'll be so advanced then that I'm gonna turn it into like a DeLorean, like time travel machine. So it'll be that much cooler. And if I win, then
you'll get my point.
Either your camera.
No, you get my point.
Well, once it's a time machine, you can come back to this conversation and just stop the whole thing right here.
There you go. Brock got the good idea. So I'm not going to win either way, so it doesn't matter.
Well, all right, we won't go down that rabbit hole, but anyway, this was a great episode. I think this stuff is fascinating. You guys are always interesting to talk to about this stuff too, because you're very knowledgeable and
a bit crazy too, but
yeah. But this was fun. So if you want to follow us, check out missinglinks.fm. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate that. We need at least one, and this is like episode 17. And
also YouTube troll. Go on YouTube. Get that traction.
Yeah, YouTube too.
And we're on TikTok too. We're on Instagram. Not yet, right?
Yeah, I don't like it. Look, I'll be honest with you. I'm not a fan of nothing to do with Zuckerberg, but Facebook sucks. And
wait, you don't want to live in the metaverse with us?
Let me ask you this: do you spend more time on TikTok or Instagram?
TikTok, a significant amount.
TikTok is like got the best algorithm of any of these companies. I mean, how good is it? It shows you everything you want to know.
Good enough that it's shameful.
Yeah. Well, all right. We'll end it there. This was fun.